The envelope arrived with blood on the corners. Park Joon-ho has ruled Seoul's underworld for 15 years. No weaknesses, no family, no vulnerabilities. He opened it. 2 boys. 8 years old. Identical. His eyes staring back at him. They have your eyes. And now, so do we. If these boys exist, that means she's alive. Nia. The woman who witnessed him commit murder 8 years ago and disappeared. She didn't just run. She took his sons. And now his most trusted lieutenant has found them. 48 hours. That's all the time Joon-ho has before Min-suk destroys the family he never knew existed. Before we dive into how Park Joon-ho's world is about to explode, let me ask you something. Have you ever made a decision that changed everything? A choice you couldn't take back? That's what this story is about.
Impossible choix.
Hidden truths. And the courage it takes to face the consequences of both. If stories like this pull you in, stories about family, redemption, and the kind of love that makes you sacrifice everything, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button right now. No fees, no contracts, just powerful stories delivered to you every single day. Drop a comment and tell me, if you discovered you had children you never knew about, would you uproot your entire life to protect them? Or would you keep them at a distance to keep them safe from your dangerous world? I want to hear from you. Your perspective matters. And while you're at it, smash that like button if you're already hooked. Let's get into this story. Alright, let's get back to Park Joon-ho's impossible situation. Because that photograph? It's about to tear his entire world apart. The evening in Atlanta had a soft golden glow, sunlight spilling across the polished floors of the art gallery. Nia moved through the crowd with quiet grace, her fingers brushing lightly over the edges of canvases, a smile tugging at her lips as she paused to admire a painting. That was where she first noticed him, Joon-ho, leaning casually against a marble column, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, but somehow already seeing her. The air between them seemed to hum, a magnetic pull that neither could resist. Over the weeks that followed, their encounters became a rhythm. Whispered conversations over steaming cups of coffee, late-night walks along rain-slick streets, laughter echoing through empty halls as he held her hand, and the soft press of his lips against hers beneath city lights. It was a montage of stolen moments, each more intoxicating than the last. One night, curiosity led Nia to a shadowed warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place Joon-ho had hesitated to describe. She watched, heart pounding, as men moved with precise, lethal efficiency. The sudden crack of a gunshot split the air, and she saw it all, the cold efficiency of a murder committed in the dim light. Her breath caught, and then their eyes met across the glass of a dusty window. For a brief heartbeat, the world narrowed to just him and her, a silent understanding flashing between them. Fear surged through her veins, adrenaline pushing her forward, and without a word, she turned and ran. The weeks that followed were a blur of hiding, changing addresses, and frantic nights spent curled on the floor, clutching herself when the realization came. She was pregnant. Not with one child, but 2. Twins, she discovered in trembling disbelief, and the weight of the responsibility pressed down on her like nothing she had ever felt. There was no choice she could imagine other than to disappear completely and raise them alone, away from the dangerous orbit of a man like Joon-ho. Her heart ached with every step, every decision, yet there was a fierce resolve underneath it all. Time became a quiet companion. She learned the rhythms of her new life with meticulous care, feeding schedules, lullabies whispered in the dark, and the soft, steady heartbeat of twins asleep in her arms. Kai, with his curious eyes that mirrored hers, and Liam, smaller but fierce in determination, became her world. Mornings were filled with the soft chaos of breakfast and school preparations, afternoons with stories and gentle lessons about right and wrong, and nights with whispered prayers for safety and peace. Now, 8 years later, Nia moved through her life with a quiet strength, the kind carved from years of sleepless nights and hidden fears. The city hummed outside her window, but inside, her world was small and steady, contained within the laughter and soft murmurs of Kai and Liam. Every glance she cast at them reminded her of the choices she had made, of the life she had built from shadows and courage, and of the secret that had shaped her existence, her heart carrying a love too fierce to ever relinquish. The skyline of Seoul glimmered under the fading twilight, each high-rise a testament to Park Joon-ho's dominion. In the opulent heart of his headquarters, he sat behind a massive desk, sharp eyes scanning reports that detailed the shifting loyalties and subtle betrayals within his empire. Min-suk's name appeared again and again, a stark reminder of treachery that had grown under the cover of loyalty. The man Joon-ho had once trusted with everything was now a shadowed threat, moving pieces in a game Joon-ho hadn't anticipated. Every word, every movement, every alliance Min-suk had forged across continents posed a direct risk to the woman Joon-ho had never stopped thinking about. Without hesitation, he issued orders. An extraction team would move to Atlanta immediately. Their mission: secure Nia Caldwell and her sons, eliminate any threat, and ensure she reached safety. Back in Atlanta, Nia's evening had begun like any other. The twins, Kai and Liam, were building towers of blocks, their laughter filling the small apartment. But the peace shattered in an instant. Glass exploded as the window gave way under the weight of a bullet. Shadows spilled into her living room. Min-suk's men had found her. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the hallways. Nia dove to the floor, dragging Kai and Liam behind the couch. Heart pounding, adrenaline surging, she knew there was no room for error. The attackers moved like predators, calculated and unyielding, but she couldn't wait. With trembling fingers, she dialed a number she hadn't used in 8 years. "Joon-ho, they're here," she whispered, voice breaking. "Stay calm. I'm sending help." His reply was immediate, firm, familiar, a lifeline across thousands of miles. Her chest tightened at the sound of his voice, the first in nearly a decade. The line went silent except for the staccato of gunfire and her own ragged breaths. Moments later, armored vehicles tore through the chaos, extraction team shields deflecting bullets, precision replacing panic. Nia clutched her sons as they were swept to safety, every second a razor's edge. By the time the plane took off towards Seoul, the immediate danger was behind them, but the storm that Min-suk had set in motion was far from over. Nia leaned against the seat. Kai and Liam nestled close, exhausted and wide-eyed. Across the aisle, Joon-ho's eyes never left her, the weight of unspoken history pressing between them. 8 years of separation, fear, and silent longing condensed into a single, tense moment, a fragile family reunited under fire. Can we just pause for a second? Because think about what just happened. Nia Caldwell spent 8 years building a safe life for her sons. 8 years looking over her shoulder. 8 years raising twin boys alone. 8 years telling herself she made the right choice by running. And in less than 48 hours, everything she built just shattered. Now she's on a plane to Seoul, the last place she ever wanted to be, sitting across from a man she once loved and still fears, while her sons meet their father for the first time during a literal gunfight. If you're feeling the weight of this moment, show me. Hit that like button right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? This one is free. And it brings you stories that make you feel something. Stories that stay with you long after the video ends. Drop a comment. Team NIA or Team Joon-ho? Whose perspective do you understand more? The mother who ran to protect her children, or the father who never got the chance to choose? Let's keep this story going. Now, let's see what happens when this fractured family lands in Seoul. Because the safe house Joon-ho thinks will protect them, it's about to become the most dangerous place they could be. The safe house in Seoul was a fortress disguised as a modern apartment complex, sleek lines and reinforced walls giving the illusion of normalcy. Nia followed the twins inside, each step heavier than the last, her heart tight with anxiety. Kai and Liam clutched her hands, eyes wide, still processing the chaos of the extraction. Junho waited in the living room, tall and immovable, his presence filling the space with a quiet intensity. The boys froze, unsure how to greet the man they had only known from whispered bedtime stories. "Hi," Liam said first, curiosity edging over fear. His small hand lifted in tentative greeting. Kai, more cautious, kept his distance, eyes narrowing as if trying to assess a puzzle he wasn't ready to solve. Junho's stern exterior softened, a flicker of hesitation crossing his features. "I'm your father," he said, the words strange on his tongue, as though he were speaking them for the first time in a lifetime. The ice broke slowly. Junho knelt to Liam's level, teaching him the first Korean words, simple greetings, numbers, colors. He moved to the chessboard on the coffee table next, explaining strategy with patience, a side of him no one outside his empire had ever seen. Liam absorbed every gesture, every word, while Kai watched warily, arms crossed, silently testing the waters of this new relationship. Nia lingered nearby, a mix of relief and apprehension pressing against her chest. She had feared this reunion for 8 years, and now that it had happened, she couldn't decide if she should step in or let them navigate it themselves. Later, the security briefing arrived. Screens flickered to life, showing intelligence reports and intercepted communications. Min-suk's betrayal was now public. Every rival, every associate, everyone who had once respected Junho's discretion now knew the truth. His empire, his carefully constructed world, was exposed. The room hummed with the weight of danger, a constant reminder that safety was temporary and vigilance essential. Despite the tension, Nia couldn't deny the surreal beauty of the evening that followed. They sat around a low dining table, sharing a simple meal. Junho carefully poured rice into bowls for the boys, explaining the etiquette with gentle instruction. The twins laughed softly when he struggled to fold the napkin correctly, and even Kai, usually skeptical, allowed himself a smile. Nia watched from across the room, the image of her sons laughing with the man who had once been her everything, the man who was now their father, etching itself into her memory. The juxtaposition of tenderness against the backdrop of danger was dizzying, almost unreal. For the first time in years, the family felt whole, even as shadows of Min-suk's coup loomed outside the reinforced walls. Here, in this fragile bubble of connection, Nia allowed herself a fleeting sense of hope. The past had arrived in Seoul, violent and unyielding, but within the walls of the safe house, she saw the possibility of what might come if love and courage could hold long enough to withstand the storm. The safe house was quiet now, the chaos of the day reduced to the hum of the air conditioning and the soft creak of floorboards under cautious footsteps. Nia found Junho in the small study, seated at the desk with a glass of whiskey, shadows cutting across his face in sharp angles. She hesitated at the doorway, words stuck somewhere between fear and the necessity of truth. "I need to tell you something," she said finally, voice trembling. He didn't look up, but his attention shifted just enough to indicate she had it. She swallowed, recalling the warehouse, the blood, the sudden deaths that had defined the man he was and the man he might have been. "About the warehouse, the night about the murders, I was there." His hand tightened around the glass, knuckles whitening. "I should hate you," she said, her eyes searching his. "You should," he admitted softly, the honesty cutting through the tension like a knife. "But you ran to protect them. To protect our sons." Junho's question was quiet, almost gentle. "Did you ever think about telling me?" Nia looked down at her hands, twisting them in her lap. "Every day. But I was afraid. Afraid of what it would mean for you, for them, for everything I tried to build." Her voice cracked. The defensive walls she had held around her heart for 8 years began to tremble. She saw, For the first time, the possibility that maybe she didn't have to carry it all alone. The conversation lingered between them, fragile and tense, until the shrill blare of the security alarm shattered the quiet. Both tensed instantly, instincts trained over decades kicking in. Screens lit up, cameras tracking movement outside the perimeter. False alarm. Relief, however brief, filled the room. But Junho's face darkened as the true intent of the night became clear. Min-suk had orchestrated something far worse. Gunfire erupted before anyone could react fully. Men scaled walls, broke into the compound, their intent unmistakable. Junho moved with lethal precision, each shot calculated, each movement controlled. Kai and Liam froze, witnessing the violence that defined their father's world. Fear and awe warred across their faces as the man they had just begun to know became the monster their mother had warned them about. The attackers fell, one after another, until the room finally quieted. Junho's chest heaved, eyes still sharp, but the twins recoiled, pressed against Nia, realizing the truth. The father they had imagined, the stories of courage and strength, carried a darkness they couldn't yet reconcile. This right here is the moment that breaks my heart every single time. Kai and Liam just watched their father, the man they've been curious about their whole lives, the man they've imagined in bedtime stories, turn into the exact monster their mother warned them about. Do you understand the tragedy of that? Junho did exactly what a father should do. He protected his children from immediate danger. But in doing so, he showed them the violence that defines his world. The violence Nia ran from. The violence she's tried to shield them from for 8 years. And now his sons are afraid of him. How do you come back from that? If this story is hitting you emotionally, I need you to do 3 things. First, like this video. It tells me you're invested, and it helps this story reach people who need to hear it. Second, subscribe to this channel. No cost, just incredible storytelling that makes you think and feel. Third, comment your honest reaction. Have you ever done the right thing in the worst possible way? Have you ever protected someone but traumatized them in the process? Real talk, no judgment. Let's support each other in the comments. Okay, let's get back to the story. Because just when you think things can't get worse for this family, Min-suk makes his most devastating move yet. The room was heavy with silence after the attackers were neutralized. Smoke from the spent gunfire lingered in the corners, acrid and stubborn, a reminder of the violence that had erupted within the safe house. Kai sat stiffly on the couch, his small hands gripping his knees, refusing to look at his father. Liam, unable to hold back the tears, clung to Nia, his face buried in her shoulder, shaking quietly. Junho stood in the center of the room, chest still rising and falling with adrenaline. The familiar ache of heartbreak twisted in his chest, sharper than any wound he had endured in his life. I was protecting them, he said softly, voice hoarse, directed more at himself than anyone else. Nia turned her gaze from Liam to Junho, her eyes wet but resolute. You were protecting them the only way you know how. That's the problem. The words landed between them with the weight of truth. She saw him falter, the recognition dawning that no matter how much he controlled, how many enemies he destroyed, the world he had built around himself would always touch the boys, always threaten them in ways he could not fully prevent. For the first time, Junho allowed himself to acknowledge it, not just the danger outside, but the inevitable harm that came from his very existence. Every plan, every layer of security, every eliminated threat, it all came at a cost he could not shield them from. His world was a fortress built with fear, and the walls were made of their potential suffering. A chime echoed from the encrypted phone on the desk, drawing his attention. The message glowed on the screen. Min-suk. One line, cold and unyielding. They'll never be safe while you're who you are. The clarity was brutal. Min-suk had been right in a way Junho hated to admit. His identity, his empire, his very nature, Everything that had defined him for 15 years was now a weapon pointed directly at his sons. No security protocols, no safe houses, no loyal guards could fully erase that truth. Junho sank into a chair, head in his hands, the weight of impossibility pressing down. For the first time, he began to imagine an alternative, a thought so alien it scared him. What if he gave up everything? Not just his empire, but his power, his reputation, his place in the world he had conquered with fear. What if the only way to truly protect Kai and Liam was to dismantle everything that made him Park Junho? The sound of Liam's soft sobs against Nia's shoulder brought him back, a reminder that time was limited, that the boy's innocence had already been grazed by the edges of his violent world. He looked at Nia, at the two children who were still trembling in the aftermath, and a new kind of resolve began to take root. The impossible path might be the only one left. In that quiet, haunted room, surrounded by shadows and smoke, Junho realized the truth he could no longer deny. Protection came at a cost, and the cost had already begun to scar the ones he loved most. To safeguard them, he might have to sacrifice everything he had spent a lifetime building. The message arrived just as the night had settled into an uneasy quiet. Min-suk's ultimatum glowed on the encrypted line, cold and unyielding. Surrender yourself. Give me control of your organization. Or I take what's yours. Starting with the boy, who looks like you. Junho's hand tightened around the phone until the screen cracked under the pressure of his grip. He didn't need to read the words twice. The threat was clear, and more devastating than any physical assault. Min-suk was targeting Kai. The boy who bore his face, his blood, his future. The weight of it pressed down with an unbearable force, and Junho realized that no fortress, no loyal guard, no bulletproof wall could shield the children from the war he had built around them. It didn't take long for the betrayal to reveal itself. One of his own team, someone he had trusted with his life, had facilitated Min-suk's access. Junho had spent years training his men, building loyalty through fear and respect, but even the strongest ties could unravel when greed whispered in the right ear. The revelation hit like a physical blow, leaving him stunned in the middle of the safe house. Hours later, in the dead of night, the assault came. Silent but precise, an extraction team slipped past perimeter sensors and made their way to Kai's room. Liam, awakened by the muffled struggle, pressed himself against Nia, watching in horror as his brother was taken. His small body shook with tears and terror, and he clung to Nia as though letting go would mean losing his family entirely. Nia's voice broke under the weight of what had just happened. 8 years. He was safe for 8 years. Her hands covered her face, shaking, a sob ripping through her chest. Every careful plan, every sleepless night spent guarding them, every risk she had taken to keep them hidden, it had all been shattered in minutes. Junho dropped to his knees, fists slamming the floor. Rage, helplessness, and unbearable guilt collided in a storm inside him. He had protected his sons before, had killed to keep them safe. But this was beyond the physical realm. His inability to anticipate betrayal from within, to prevent Min-suk's hand from reaching Kai, left him feeling powerless in a way he never had before. The phone vibrated again. Another message from Min-suk, taunting, confirming the boy was in his grasp. The man had engineered the perfect scenario, exposing weakness, shattering trust, and forcing a choice no father should ever be asked to make. Junho's mind raced, calculating every possible move, every path to reclaim his son, but none were simple. None came without cost. The room seemed smaller, darker, suffocating with the weight of what had just occurred. Junho looked at Nia, at Liam, at the emptiness where Kai had been moments ago, and understood the terrifying truth. In his world, protection was inseparable from trauma, and the next move might demand the ultimate sacrifice. I want you to really sit with this moment. Nia's worst nightmare just came true. The danger she spent 8 years running from just took her son. Junho's greatest fear just materialized. The empire he built to make himself untouchable just became the weapon pointed at his child's head. And Kai, innocent, brilliant, 8-year-old Kai, is in the hands of a man who sees him as nothing but leverage. This is what happens when the past catches up. When secrets explode. When violence perpetuates itself across generations. But here's what I love about this story. It's not over yet. What Junho does next will define who he really is. Not the empire he built. Not the reputation he crafted. Not the fear he commanded. But the choice he makes in this moment, when everything is on the line. If you're on the edge of your seat right now, prove it. Like this video if your heart is racing. Subscribe if you need to see how this ends. Just you, me, and stories that matter. And comment. What would you sacrifice to save your child? Your career? Your reputation? Your life? Everything? Because that's the question Junho is about to answer. Let's find out what choice he makes. Let's watch a king burn his throne to save his son. Junho sat alone in the dim light of the safe house, the silence pressing against his skull like a physical weight. The empire he had built with his own hands, decades of blood, cunning, and unyielding control, now felt like a coffin. Every line of power, every alliance, every network of influence suddenly seemed fragile, disposable. Kai's face flashed in his mind, terrified, taken by Min-suk's merciless hands. That image burned hotter than any threat to his empire, hotter than the betrayal that had already cut him deep. He stared at the monitors in front of him, screens filled with encrypted accounts, offshore investments, and the skeleton of a criminal empire that once seemed untouchable. For the first time, he felt the true weight of the choices he had made. Every life he had manipulated, every secret kept, every enemy eliminated, it had all led here, to the impossible crossroads where the only way to save his son was to destroy everything he had built. Minutes passed, stretching into hours, as Junho's mind raced through options. Then a decision crystallized, dark and absolute. If Min-suk wanted power, he would have it, but it would be hollow, meaningless. The empire could be sacrificed. The networks dismantled. Rivals exposed. Evidence sent to authorities who had long circled, waiting for a chance. In one calculated stroke, he would turn his greatest creation into ashes. He contacted international authorities under a pseudonym, offering testimony, evidence, and cooperation beyond imagination. Documents were sent, shell companies collapsed, accounts frozen, rivals implicated. Overnight, the empire became worthless. Every fortune built on fear and manipulation crumbled. The city that had trembled at the mention of his name now found its king dethroned by his own hand. "You wanted my kingdom?" he whispered into the dark, voice hoarse with fury and exhaustion. "It's ashes." Nia, watching silently, understood in a moment that cut deeper than words could. The man who had terrified her, who had haunted the boy's nightmares, was now sacrificing everything not for power, not for revenge, but for love. For Kai. The recognition struck her with a mix of awe and sorrow. He would rather be powerless than let his child suffer. Preparations for the final confrontation began immediately. Junho gathered intelligence, weapons, and plans, but there was a different intensity in him now, a single-minded clarity that had nothing to do with empire and everything to do with family. The fire of vengeance burned in him, yes, but now tempered with the cold calculation of a father who understood that survival wasn't about domination, it was about sacrifice. Each action, each maneuver, carried the weight of all he had lost and all he was willing to give. He moved with precision, unflinching, ready to face Min-suk and reclaim his son, even if it meant the complete destruction of the world he had built. He thought of Kai, of Liam, of Nia, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the faintest glimmer of hope amidst the ruin. The throne he had spent 15 years building was gone, but perhaps, in its place, he could forge something worth keeping, a chance to save his child and rebuild, not an empire, but a life. The abandoned shipyard loomed like a skeleton against the night sky, rusted cranes creaking in the wind, the water lapping quietly against the hulls of forgotten vessels. Junho stepped into the open space, every sense alert, eyes scanning the shadows where Min-suk's men should have been waiting. But it wasn't the men who mattered tonight, it was him. The man who had taken Kai, who had demanded power and feared nothing. Min-suk emerged from the darkness, his coat flapping like a banner of defiance. "You'll surrender, Junho," he said, voice tight with anticipation. "Hand over the organization or—" "You think there's anything left to hand over?" Junho interrupted, voice low, unyielding. "I spent 15 years building a throne. I'll spend one night burning it for my son." The words hit Min-suk like a blow to the chest. Rage twisted his features, disbelief flashing in his eyes. He lunged, and the fight was immediate, raw. Hands gripped, bodies collided, the sound of fists against flesh echoing across the silent docks. Kai watched from the shadows, small and wide-eyed, heart pounding in his chest. Fear and awe collided as he saw his father move with a lethal precision, a predator protecting what mattered most. Junho did not hold back, but neither did he deliver the final, fatal strike. Min-suk crumpled to the ground, gasping, defeated not just by strength, but by the immovable will of a man who had nothing left to lose, but everything to protect. "I'm breaking the cycle," Junho said quietly, leaning close so Min-suk could hear, his voice cold but steady. "Starting with you." The distant wail of sirens grew louder, cutting through the night. Authorities had arrived, tipped off in advance, ready to take custody of Min-suk and his men. Handcuffs clicked around the wrist of the man who had thought himself untouchable. Kai ran into his father's arms, wrapping his small frame around him with the unspoken understanding that they were safe now. "You gave up everything," Nia whispered as she approached, her voice trembling with disbelief and awe. "No," Junho said, holding Kai tighter, feeling the pulse of life against him, the warmth he had risked everything to protect. "I found everything." For the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to breathe, to feel the weight of fear and rage lift, replaced by something more fragile and enduring: hope. The docks, the dark water, the rusting cranes, all of it seemed to fade into the background. There was only the boy, his son, alive and in his arms, and the quiet understanding that he had truly chosen what mattered most. Everything else, the empire, the power, the fear, was gone, reduced to ashes by his own hand. But in that destruction, Junho found something no throne could ever give: the chance to be a father, fully and without compromise, for the first time in his life. The courtroom was a quiet storm of flashing cameras and whispered speculation. Junho sat beside his attorney, a stack of files and digital evidence spread before him, each page a key to dissolving the empire he had once ruled with an iron fist. The prosecutors leaned forward, eager to dissect the network of corruption, the hidden accounts, the silent intimidation that had kept rivals in check for years. And yet, he spoke freely, without hesitation, naming names, detailing transactions, revealing the intricate web of loyalty and fear that had once made him untouchable. Immunity had been granted in exchange for his full cooperation, a bitter pill, but one he swallowed without regret. The empire he had built over 15 years unraveled in real time, rival factions scattered or arrested, financial networks collapsing like sandcastles in a rising tide. News channels ran continuous coverage, headlines screaming the fall of the feared kingpin, showing grainy surveillance footage of raids and confiscated assets. The world watched as Park Junho became not a shadowy figure of power, but a man surrendering everything for a single purpose: his family. Nia watched him from the protective custody room where the twins slept fitfully, exhausted from therapy sessions and the emotional toll of recent events. She observed him quietly, seeing not the man who had once terrified her, but a father attempting to bridge the chasm of years lost. There was no grand declaration of love or apology, just a slow, deliberate effort to rebuild trust, gestures that spoke louder than words. Kai and Liam, under careful guidance of child psychologists, began the painstaking work of understanding the father they had never truly known, learning that the same man who could strike with deadly precision could also offer safety and warmth. Junho found himself in moments of quiet reflection, staring at the twins' sleeping faces, realizing that redemption was not instant. Forgiveness was not a switch to flip, but a fragile thread he needed to nurture. Nia approached him one evening as he reviewed yet another file for the authorities. Her hand brushed against his, hesitant but intentional, a silent acknowledgement of the tentative peace forming between them. "Do you think it will ever feel normal?" she asked softly, voice carrying both fear and hope. "Normal," Junho repeated, eyes following the gentle rise and fall of Kai's chest.
No.
"But we can have something better. Something real." For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine mornings untainted by fear, nights without shadows lurking outside the window. The twins drew pictures of their family, clumsy sketches full of bright colors and hope, placing them on the refrigerator in the safe house, each stroke a small step toward healing. And while the scars of the past remained, both visible and unseen, a fragile sense of peace had begun to take root. It was not complete. It was not perfect. But it was a beginning, a promise whispered in quiet moments, a family slowly knitting itself together after the chaos of a life built on power and fear. And for the first time, Park Junho understood that sometimes surrendering everything could be the most powerful act of all. 6 months had passed, and the skyline of Seoul was visible only as a distant blur from the small house tucked into the hills outside the city. The air smelled of pine and rain-soaked earth, a quiet that Junho had not known in decades. The house itself was modest, wooden floors, a small garden, a living room filled with sunlight filtering through sheer curtains. It was nothing like the sprawling fortress of his past life, but it was theirs, and for the first time, it felt safe. Junho had traded the empire for legitimacy. His days were now filled with security consulting, advising corporations on risk assessment and personal protection strategies. No more shadows, no more threats looming in every alley, just work that allowed him to provide, to be accountable in ways he never had before. Nia had returned to photography, her studio a modest room in the same house, walls adorned with her early work and new projects that captured moments of ordinary beauty. The camera had become her tool of expression again, her way of processing the past while embracing the present. Kai and Liam moved through the rhythms of normal life with surprising adaptability. They attended school, played in the garden, and laughed over meals that were nothing like the tense dinners of their past. Sundays had become sacred, family dinners around the wooden table, laughter filling the spaces that had once been heavy with fear. "Dad, what exactly do you do all day?" Liam asked one evening, his fork paused midair, eyes searching. Junho set down his own utensils and met his son's gaze, softening in a way that had once seemed impossible. "I'm learning to be a good father," he said simply. "That's the most important job I'll ever have." Kai, sitting beside him, beamed. "You're doing great, Dad," he said, and the words struck Junho deeper than any compliment ever could. They were not just words, they were trust, growing slowly but unmistakably. After dinner, the family settled into the living room, blankets draped over their laps, the twins' small hands tucked into their parents as they played a quiet game of storytelling. Junho's thumb brushed over Kai's knuckles, Nia's fingers intertwined with Liam's, and the four of them sat together in a moment that was ordinary and miraculous all at once. The past had left its mark, but the present, this fragile, tender present, was theirs to hold. Junho looked around at the family he had fought so hard to protect and could finally allow himself to love without fear. Transformation was never about erasing the past, he realized. It was about choosing to be different despite it. Choosing to break cycles, to create a life where love outweighed power, where safety and laughter were possible. And that is how a monster becomes a father. Let's talk about what we just experienced together. Park Junho spent 15 years building an empire. 15 years controlling every variable, eliminating every weakness, perfecting the art of power through fear. And it took 8 seconds, the time it took to look at a photograph of 2 boys with his eyes, to realize that everything he'd built was worthless compared to everything he'd lost. He didn't save his son with violence. He didn't protect his family with power. He did it with sacrifice, with vulnerability, with the courage to destroy everything he'd created to become something he'd never been, worthy. This is why I love stories like this. Because they remind us that redemption isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to change. If this story moved you, if it made you think, made you feel, made you see something differently, then I need you to do something for me. Smash that like button. Not just a polite tap. Really hit it. Let me know this story connected with you. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories that make you feel this deeply. Stories about family, redemption, love, sacrifice, and the courage it takes to break cycles. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's struggling with their past. Someone who's wondering if change is possible. Someone who needs to know that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. And comment. I want to hear from you. What was your favorite moment in this story? Did you cry when Kai said, "You're doing great, Dad"? Do you believe people like Junho can truly change? Or is the past always stronger? Or would you have forgiven him if you were Nia? Your thoughts matter. Your perspective adds to this community. So drop a comment and I'll respond. I read every single one. Before you go, let me leave you with this. We all have parts of ourselves we're not proud of. Choices we regret. Moments we wish we could take back. The question isn't whether we've made mistakes. It's whether we have the courage to do better moving forward. Park Junho didn't erase his past. He can't. The people he hurt are still hurt. The damage he caused is still real. But he chose to stop the cycle. He chose his children over his empire. He chose vulnerability over control. He chose love over fear. And that choice, that's where redemption begins. If you're dealing with your own past, your own mistakes, your own guilt, this story is for you. You can't change what you've done, but you can change what you do next. One choice at a time. One sacrifice at a time. One moment of courage at a time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for investing your time in this story. Thank you for being part of this community. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember, the greatest power isn't control. It's the courage to change. Now go make the choice that changes everything. This has been the story of Park Junho, Nia Caldwell, and the twin sons who transformed both their lives. A story of secrets and sacrifice, of violence and redemption, of fear and love. Thank you for experiencing it with me.
Subscribe,
Like,
comment, share.
I'll see you in the next story. Take care of yourselves. And remember, it's never too late to become who you were meant to be.